Welcome, newcomers. This is great. People are coming in. Exciting day today. And it's always exciting to consider everyone. You know, we have people from Ghana, South Africa, and Baltic with Henrik and Karin, and Nairobi. And I'm sure we have different landscapes outside our windows. Mine, I can maybe see our snow-covered lake, but that's about it. How about you, Winnie? You see a lot of water, unfortunately, right?
No, not water today. We're lucky. No rain today. At least it's just dull, but no water. Green grass.
Green grass. Okay, that's nice
Green
to see,
grass.
though. We have Samuel coming in, Enoch, Savannah Horvath, very nice. We also have David Lindelöf from the VREF walking program. He's the coordinator of the walking program. So I know several of you know David. More of you will be knowing him in the future, I'm sure. Awesome.
Good day to you, Prof. Jane.
Hello, Samuel. Good to have you here.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you,
Nice
Samuel.
to see you again.
Sure.
So, Mark, I am writing to you right now with suggested meeting times in the chat. So come on in there.
I'll respond later. Thanks.
Yeah. We will begin in another 2 minutes or so, just at 5 past the hour. Hopefully, we'll have more people streaming in as they continue to get into the platform.
Oh, good. People are coming on. This is very nice. You know, sometimes I wish we could like distribute like chips and drinks to everyone as part of this mingling process, but we all kind of have to get used to that. We have to mingle by just chatting it up, you know. And it's nice to see so many people, some new people too, who haven't been here before. We're really excited that there are some new names. That's wonderful. So that's great. And how are things with you, Enoch?
Yeah, very well. Coping.
Doing well.
On our project, one of them I think we are drafting our reports. It should be done soon. I just received email from Fabienne. Yeah. We got the report.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I will respond soon.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, yes, Fabienne is our executive secretary, and she usually gets to know all of you right about around reporting times for projects, right? Yeah. So, Savannah has some much needed rain in South Africa. That's good. Well, this is great. So how are we doing time-wise, Winnie? And
yeah, we are when we should begin. We are at 5 past, so 5 past the hour. I think usually we do that, and others join us. Otherwise, we'd never go through the 3 presentations. Yeah,
this is great. And please, as Cora mentioned in the chat, come in and tell us where you are and that you are happy to be here.
Okay, so I think we have to just let Henrik give us the welcoming remarks so that we can all begin the process. Otherwise, we will be too behind. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We are glad to see that we are a good number and we'll continue streaming in. This is normal with seminars. Others come a little bit late, but they will join us in due course. So at this point, I would want to call upon Henrik Normark to at least give his remarks before we roll out the seminar. Henrik?
Thank you, Winnie, and hello, everyone. I'm Henrik Nolmark, Director of VREF, Volvo Research and Educational Foundations, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all to this research forum under the MAC program. MAC stands for Mobility and Access in African Cities, a VREF program which has been running now for some years. Today, unlike many other seminars, we will focus on tools today, tools for improving user information and developing more inclusive paratransit planning. So that's part of our series of research forums, which is an important series of events under what we call the communities of learning pillar of action in the MAC program. So we have knowledge building, we have communities of learning, which is a lot about sharing results and findings, but also sharing our methodologies, research activities. So we don't always have finalized projects with results. We quite often share our ongoing projects in this research forum series. I'm not going to stay for long. My apologies. I have other obligations this afternoon, but it was nice to be here just to say hello and welcoming you and thanking all of you for coming. Also thanking Winnie for leading, facilitating and moderating the event, and also emphasizing that we have also Jane Somerton, scientific advisor to VREF, and Karin Henriksson, communicator, also David Lindelöv, who is our specialist in walking. So you're visiting the MAC program today, David. That's nice to see. And a lot of familiar faces. I wish you a very fruitful webinar, and be in touch again late, but maybe not later this year, maybe next year. And I know Jane will tell you a little bit more at the end of today's session about what's going to happen next year in the series. So back to you, Winnie.
Thank you so much, Henrik. It always gives us a great pleasure to hear a word from one of you, and before we roll out the theme. And as Henrik has said, this theme is a very interesting and unique theme, new tools for more inclusive transport planning and user information, majorly focusing on mapping, paratransit operation, engaging stakeholders, and developing co-design laboratories. Yes, we have tools, but most tools tend to apply to formal transport. But this is now, as we are beginning to see research looking into how do we also have tools that focus on paratransit. So it's very interesting. And apart from that, most of all the three papers that will be presented are more of a building on to research that was previously done with VREF, which is very good. And then also, as we've had a mix of scholars, we have scholars, young scholars, senior scholars working with young scholars in programs. So we expect to have a real interesting discussion this afternoon. And we will straight away get into the discussion by having the first team come in. And that will be led by Dr. Obiora Nene. And as I give a brief about Obiora, I'll request you to be loading your PowerPoints. I know you are a big team, but you are the lead person in terms of presenting this paper. So Dr. Obiora Nene is an African scholar and a civil engineer. He obtained his PhD from the University of Cape Town, specializing in transportation planning and engineering. He now works as a senior lecturer in the Department of Civil Engineering at UCT. His research interests are transport planning in low data context, public transport network design, transport justice, transport energy and emissions modeling, and big data applications in transport. He teaches courses in transport engineering, urban transportation planning, and transportation modeling at undergraduate and postgraduate levels. He has also been involved in many projects focused on improving transport in Africa. So Biora, the platform is yours for you to share your ongoing research. Thank you. And I would also like to introduce Mary Mwangi, who is taking notes for us. She's been taking notes for VREF Forum for quite some time. Thank you very much, Mary Mwangi. Mary Mwangi is based at the Institute for Development Studies, University of Nairobi, where I'm located as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie, for the introduction, and welcome to everyone. So today I'll be discussing the project that is being done by the University of Cape Town with other project partners with the sponsorship of VREF. We say special thank you to VREF for making this possible. But I'll be discussing modeling paratransit in low data environments in Africa. And I think that in her summary, Winnie has captured the essence of this project, which is the fact that quite a lot of the thinking and the philosophy that guides public transport planning up till today focuses more on formal transit systems, focuses more on the performance of the transit system or the transport system, rather than paratransit systems or what is known as informal transport systems that is more prevalent in context like sub-Saharan Africa. And so I'll be discussing the details of our work that have been done so far and where we are going with the project. Briefly, this is the team, the project team. The composition is the University of Cape Town, the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, the Malawi University of Business and Applied Sciences, University of Rwanda, and the Technikon in Israel. And every member of this team is introducing a dimension that is helpful for the project. By the way of a background which has already been touched on by Winnie, current planning processes in transportation, they are focused on, first of all, they are developed, they are done with proprietary tools mostly, and then they focus on formal transport systems. They focus on things like level of service of the system and all of that. And in doing that, it then leads to the exclusion of people, because most of the time with the models we work with, for instance, the typical 4-step model, you actually don't identify a person within the model. You just are estimating trips, you are estimating the congestion and the level of service of the links at the end of the day. And so you tend to lose that human element within that model. And so we are saying there has to be better ways or more improved ways to address transportation problems that speak to the individuals and how the transport system impacts them. And so the question is, I looked at some numbers, and roughly 78%, according to the United Nations, 78% of the of sub-Saharan Africa walks or uses some form of NMT to get to their activities. So that's over 1 billion people. And yet, when we plan for transport, we're planning for congestion alleviation, which is not bad in and of itself. It's just the case that then you lose sight of people and, like I said, how the transport system actually impacts them. Again, in this slide, you just show briefly like a schematic of a typical travel demand model as we will have it. And if you look at the outcome of this model, it's again the number of trips per transport links, just to the end that we would understand congestion levels and how we can alleviate them. But there's really nothing in there that says this is how person X gets to their activity, or this is how a lack of the service in their area affects their ability, to earn a living and things like that. And so the other important thing or question that comes out, observation really that comes out, is that the current planning processes often ignore informal transport system. And as I said before, informal transport systems or paratransit make up the largest share of how we travel in Southern Africa, maybe in the global South as well. And so we try to address this in this project, looking at the concept of transport justice as as introduced in his book by Carol Martins, who is a member of this project team from the Technicon in Israel. And so the real question he was trying to ask in his book is, can we plan transport differently? Can we look at transport planning from a different perspective, where we can think about everyone being, or every person who needs to travel being entitled to certain levels or a sufficient level of accessibility. And so what you see on the slides is a quadrant that was developed by Carol Martins that helps you sort of identify groups within subgroups within a community and helps you map their levels of accessibility as well as their levels of mobility. And so with this quadrant, you can prioritize which group or identify which group in the community actually needs transportation services the most. And so that way you can prioritize them when policies are being made in terms of transport interventions, so that the dotted lines in the quadrant indicates thresholds that can be defined, threshold accessibility thresholds, mobility thresholds, so that the groups that fall below these thresholds will then be prioritized for the interventions. I'm not going to speak much to this slide, but here I just identify sort of differences between what is proposed by Carol Martins in terms of transport justice and the conventional approaches to transport planning. So from this point, I would speak to the project that we've been engaged in. We were fortunate to have had a first, what I would call a first iteration of this project in 2020. And when we received that award, the idea was to identify how transport justice can be used as a tool for planning transportation in a sub-Saharan African context. We primarily tried to look at what would be different data environments or different operational environments, a low data perspective, and one where data was relatively rich. And so we thought we would apply this project or try to test this our models in the city of Blantyre in Malawi and Kigali. In any case, at the end of the day, a methodology was developed where we said, given these input data, we've got the typical transportation data that we have come to know, zonal centroids, demographic and socio-economic data, facilities, transit schedules in the form of GTFS, and as well the road network or the transport network. With these inputs, we could then make a decision as to which route to, or how we were going to realize transport planning according to the principles of transport justice if transit schedule data existed. And we hinged it around transit schedule data because we discovered that paratransit systems were not really focused on when GTFS is developed. So that up till now, GTFS, the development around GTFS feeds essentially have been mostly on the formal transport systems. So with this flow chart, you can actually identify within your context what data you have available, and then you can use each of these two approaches to try to solve that problem. If GTFS is available, then we had developed a tool in the R statistical language, and with that you can actually arrive at some quadrants, some transport justice quadrants for the area. But where the GTFS is not existing, then a GIS tool or a GIS based tool known as the ORS was used then to achieve the same means or the same purposes. And this is typically what comes out, like you saw in the quadrant previously. in a chart like this, every speck or every dot on the chart represents a zone within the area of study. You can see the the accessibility sufficiency levels that I identified, or the thresholds, or that I spoke about in the previous slides. And then it helps you then identify which zones fall under your thresholds and which zones should be prioritized. Obviously, this is done as well by the mode of travel. And so when we would advise or try to or speak to the policymakers about a particular place or about a particular community in terms of implementing interventions, with this tool, you can identify which communities actually should be prioritized. However, in this slide, the one big question was public transport. The fact that we had looked at two different cities that had most of their public transportation happening with paratransit meant that they were excluded in a sense, or at least the public transport mode, the paratransit mode was excluded because there was not available GTFS for this purpose. And so that gave rise to the next challenge that was then framed into the project that we are working on now. And so the objective of this project was really to identify ways and means of developing GTFS feeds for paratransit services, just so that within the context of transport planning, with transport justice principles, sorry, we are able to accommodate all the modes. And so in the first project, the public transport had actually not been part of that. And so you didn't have a complete picture of what transportation looks like, or what transportation planning according to the principles of transport justice would look like for every member of that of the cities. And so that is the driving focus of this project that we are working on currently, then to say, how do we derive or develop these GTFS specifically for paratransit? And a project like that would have larger implications, not just for Blantyre or Kigali, but for as many cities possibly in sub-Saharan Africa, where paratransit is a significant mode of travel. And so these are the objectives of the project. It is essentially to create these GTFS feeds for paratransit services, and then enrich the previous models that we have developed and the previous algorithms that we have built. Of course, case testing it again and doing some sort of comparative analysis of the initial results with the current one. And these are the work packages we have that were identified in the project, and they are at different stages of completion. We've completed the literature review for the project. We're currently finalizing the data collection and tools, and we hope to submit the final reports shortly. So let me speak briefly about GTFS. And like we know, General Transit Feed Specifications are a format. It's a unified format that most public transport agencies these days use to report their transport schedules. So when you see on the internet, on Google Transit, for instance, the schedules of a bus service in a city you are visiting or something like that, there's a GTFS feed behind that information that is being presented. And most transport agencies use that to communicate these feeds. And so the main issue that I have pointed out previously is that we don't have a systematic way of reporting the service, the paratransit, the frequencies and the operations of the paratransit service. And so we had to look now into the development of GTFS and currently there are some extensions we have identified that allows some of the behavior that is observed on the paratransit services, such as the route deviation that we often see, where the operators move away from their route just to get some passengers or to improve their profitability for the day, as well as the idea of continuous stopping, where you could actually start a trip from any point. So these two features are actually being tested by Google Transit, and we thought they might be helpful for us to represent this paratransit behavior in the GTFS. And so we explored some tools as well for the development of GTFS. OSM to GTFS is a Python programming based tool. It's automated, but has some limitations, as well as the GTFS builder, as you see on the screen. So ultimately, we settled with the static manager, the GTFS static manager that is developed by the World Resources Institute in India. That tool allows you to build your GTFS in one place. And so with that tool, we have proceeded to apply this to the city of Blantyre, where we have appointed field agents to go out and collect some relevant data. What you see on the slide are the routes that are where the data has been collected up till this point. Of course, there has been some delays, and due to issues like fuel scarcities, and I think the effect of the current austerity program that is going on in Malawi. But we are rounding this data collection process up, and so we have focused primarily at this stage on the most populated zones within the country, focusing mostly on the western parts of the country, and then later we can take on other routes. So some of the data that is required for this for transport planning with the principles of transport justice are, as you have seen, zonal data, demographic and socioeconomic data, and of course your network. So I highlight transit schedule data in red because that's the centerpiece of this project, and it's essentially GTFS. And so the data that is being collected are arrivals and departure data at terminals. We're also collecting the travel time between stops. That helps us to build a sort of profile for the routes. We have collected data around the routes, and so we have identified, like I showed you, something like 6 major routes at this stage that we are working with, and the average travel times on those routes. And so with that, we are now building the GTFS. This is the static manager tool that is being used to develop this GTFS. I'll just show an example of the stops. So the first thing is that after the field agents have gone out there with GPS equipments and collected GPS traces of the stops as they go. Those stops, those GPS traces are the red dots that you see on the screen. And with that, you are then able to, within the tool, identify the actual bus stops along your route. And with that, you can build your network and build the tool. The next step then will be to build in the frequency information, the operational information, frequencies, headways, and things like that. And that's ongoing at the moment. And I think the last slide I have here is just the next steps we are to take and where that leads us to. And so we are finalizing data collection in Blantyre and Kigali. The modeling is going on as well. And once the GTFS is fully developed, validated, and tested, we will then refine our initial models, our initial transport justice models, and the results, do this comparative analysis, and submit our final project report. I think from the point of view of reflecting on this project, it's been a very good task that we are handling and helping us see how important it is to avoid building systems, or sorry, transport systems that just focuses on the private car or on the levels of service of the system only, without actually considering the impacts on the people. And so to that end, this project has focused mostly on paratransit operating environments. We are focused on communities that are mostly disenfranchised in the supply of transport services. Transport justice in sub-Saharan Africa requires a distinct approach from the approach so far developed for conventional transport planning. That's another clear thought that comes out of our work, and the systematic mapping of population groups that are not served well remains a key component of this approach. And so it's essential to shift the discourse from focusing on congestion to the more important goal of delivering accessibility to every member of the community. So once again, thank you to VREF for this opportunity to present our work. And I'll be looking forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Obiora. Thank you very much for the presentation. You've run over your time by 5 minutes, but we hope to recover that. I will call upon now the discussant, Lawrence DeBear, who is a traffic and transportation engineer at SNA Civil and Consulting Engineers. He's currently completing his PhD under Professor Christoph Venter, whom we also have here at the University of Pretoria. His research interests lie in public transport planning, transport modeling, paratransit, and transport logistics. So Lawrence, you have the platform to give a reflection on this ongoing research. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to Dr. Obiora and Nene for very
You can
interesting.
pull down the PowerPoints, please, Obiora.
So can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Thank you for an interesting presentation. Just a couple of thoughts that I had. As you rightly said, I think research for too long has been focused on the 4-step model, which is inherently car focused. And as we all know, this model originated in America, and especially during the time when the highways were so rapidly expanding, and car was kind of the vehicle to freedom, and that way of thinking was then exported to South Africa and to many African countries, and it is encouraging to see that research and that our way of thinking has evolved to actually start looking at different perspectives and different ways of quantifying our trips in especially in public transport. Especially since our informal transport forms the largest share of our public transport. Sorry, informal transport forms the largest share of our public transport in many African countries. It's good to see a change and a shift in focus. Another interesting thing that I noticed with the sufficiency thresholds that you looked at was especially looking at the bicycle threshold. In Kigali, we saw that 100% of your bicycle trips actually fell below the threshold, and in the case of Blantyre, 50% was above the threshold. So immediately one can kind of start looking at that, seeing which country, what is their approach, and seeing how can we apply that way of thinking to different countries. Interesting. When I was reading up on your research, I actually thought about how we don't take modes like bicycle into account. I drive on a semi-highway to work every morning, 80 kilometers an hour road, and it's actually quite astonishing to see how many low-income earners travel that route on their bicycle. And quite a few occasions that I've driven past a person on his bicycle that has been driven over. So not a lot of care or thought has been put into actually the bicycle users and regarding their safety and improving the safety for them to get to work. So yes, I think it's your methodology that you've developed or to model the paratransit in low data environments is a very interesting approach, especially considering paratransit operators are very wary of being tracked using GPSs, having computers put in their cars, being tracked. For my research, data that I received from the company also told me how they had to pay many minibus taxi operators to be able to track them, to be able to see where they stopped, exactly where they drove during the day, to be able to get a very good understanding of the trips that they make. But data like that is very difficult to come by. So developing a way to record minibus taxi trips only using your starting and stopping data and your time between your stops is a very interesting methodology. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Are you done? Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much for those reflections. So, Obiora, we do not have a direct question for you, but you will come later for any reflections. I think it's been more appreciation of the methods and some of the issues and challenges there, but we can get back to that later during the opening when everybody else has presented. Let's get to the second presentation, which will be done by Gift. So Gift, you can be loading your PowerPoints as I briefly give your bio. So Gift Dumeda is an associate professor in the geography department and also a senior fellow of transport research and education center, Kumasi, TREC, at Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Ghana. His interests span transport and mobility research, transport relations with health and the environment, urban dynamics, and geospatial information science and technology. So Gift, you have the platform to share your ongoing work. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Winnie, and good afternoon to everyone. It's nice to be part of this VREF Research Forum again. And I would like to appreciate the support that we received from VREF to be able to carry out this work. And then also to acknowledge our partners. So we have partners from the Alabama Transportation Institutes, from the University of Alabama, and then the University of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. So I will be presenting on the project that is titled here as Stakeholder Perspectives for Efficient Allocation of Paratransit. And I will have to rely on some of the insights that's been shared by Obiora, has covered some of my background. So thank you very much, Obiora, for that. So the motivation for this project relates to the Sustainable Development Goal SDG 11, which is to make cities inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Specifically, the target 11.2 talks about providing access to safe, affordable, accessible, and sustainable transport systems for all. And in terms of achieving this SDG goal, access is a very important part of that targets. And here we're talking about access to social, hospitals, education, in terms of economic opportunities, jobs, and they are important indicators for any population welfare, as well as livelihood aspect as well. As Obiora has already indicated, we know that these access can be different for different communities, for different persons, and these differences or access disparities can be linked based on the income levels, also in terms of the social, whether you're a caregiving mother or you're a school kid, or you're an elderly person, and perhaps also the community that you live in. So these are some of the social, economic, and environmental disadvantages that can play out for any access to transport. And the commitment to reduce some of these barriers, it's the equity that we'll be focusing on this project. And as we know, access globally, it's usually facilitated by public transport, and specifically for Sub-Saharan Africa, as Obiora has already indicated, Paratransit is the major provider of this public transport. And here I want to really just clarify passenger transport, that it is the extent to which our land use systems and transports enable individuals to reach those opportunities that we've already mentioned in terms of getting to work, getting to hospital, getting to schools, and all of that. What we also do know about transport in Sub-Saharan Africa in terms of paratransit is that it is very, very highly inefficient and sustainable in terms of the indicators listed earlier. Either we're looking at economic efficiency or social efficiency or environmental efficiency. And this inefficiency and unsustainability can play out in various dimensions. One aspect of it is the lack of equitable allocation, where, for instance, a lot of the vehicles might ply a particular route, while other routes do not have access to enough supply of those vehicles. And this can also play out in terms of users for passengers, where they encounter unreliable transport access at different times of the day, for instance, nighttime, or different communities that do not have enough of those transport supply. But it's also a very, very a livelihood issue, where we have to also look at the operators who rely on the revenue stream for their livelihood. And for paratransit, most of their revenue stream, it's also very, very unstable. And notwithstanding, we also have the road environments, because of the excessive competition and the informality associated with, or the semi-informality associated with paratransits. The road environment that is created in terms of road safety for pedestrians and for passengers can be extremely unsafe as well. So the challenge that this project seeks to address is to say, how could we develop or provide what we're referring to here as a smart paratransit allocation system that perhaps have to be co-formulated, co-developed, and also co-implemented and in 2 cities. Here we'll be looking at Accra, Ghana, and then Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. So this is the framework that we're using for our projects, and with recognition that the best practices of paratransits are in places that can be transferred from one place to another. But what we do realize is that local contexts, it's very, very important in terms of transferring some of these best practices so that they can be applicable and sustainable within a particular area. So for this project, in terms of what we are developing, is to provide an integrated stakeholder framework to formally develop and implement and enforce the SPAS, what we refer to as a smart paratransit allocation system. And then why we are doing this? Because it's in the interest of all the stakeholders I've mentioned, in terms of users, the operators, and also for the city or the communities that those routes passes through. And how we're doing this, we have a methodology here in terms of how we'll be doing that through some stakeholder consultation, questionnaire survey, and then also through some of the GTFS, which Obiola has gracefully, given a lot of detail about that, and I will be providing some details how we incorporated it in our projects. And we have also engaged quite a number of stakeholders, which I'll also be talking about, and we also focus on some of the outputs that we intend to get out of these the smart paratransit allocation system. So in terms of some of our completed and ongoing work, we have carried out a comprehensive literature review, and have also done questionnaire survey and stakeholder consultation. Some of it's ongoing, and I've also carried out data analysis. And then synthesis and reporting are things, some of which are ongoing, and others will be completed in the future. So in terms of the questionnaire survey, we developed 3 major instruments. One of the instruments was to look at the paratransit vehicle and operation costs. So the focus here was to really understand what is on the ground in terms of the operations, the vehicles that are there, and also to understand the routes that are also there. So we developed a GTFS-like data. So we have the routes, terminal stops, and then importantly also the fares, which is a very, very contentious issues for users, between users and operators most of the time. And we also have a stakeholder consultation, which focuses on interviews and focus group discussions as well. So for the questionnaire survey, these are some of the major categories of questions that we were able to tease out. We looked at general vehicle characteristics, the capital costs, and these are very important because sometimes we don't know the range of vehicles that these paratransit operators actually use. And so our study is able to uncover that. And then the basic route information, and also the operators for the vehicle itself, and then the labor. And then also the operation costs in terms of maintenance and administrative, and then general background of vehicle or the operators as well. So the next, I will invite some of our young research assistants who were part of this project, and in the person of Idris, who will provide the context of what we've carried, the data collection we carried out in Accra, Ghana. So Idris, go ahead.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Gift. My name is Idris Saidu, and I would like to talk about the data collection phases here in Accra, Ghana. So the data collection phases here in Accra, Ghana was in 3 phases. For the first phase, we surveyed the terminals within our project area, our selected project area. And after surveying these terminals, we also surveyed routes within these terminals. So with the route, we collected some vital information about this route, which includes the flat fare for these routes that we surveyed, and also the number of vehicles registered to ply the route, as well as the unions that control this route. So for the second phase of the data collection, it was we collected data on the vehicle operation cost. And this phase, our main respondents were the drivers and also the conductors, as well as the station patrons at each of the terminals that we surveyed in the first phase. For the third phase of the data collection, we collected first information for each stop on the route that we surveyed in the first phase of the data collection. So this simply means that for each route, at each stop, we tend to collect first information for them. And with this data collection, there are some challenges that we faced, and I would like to talk about one of the challenges which was crucial for us here in Accra, Ghana. So the challenge that we faced is about the collection of the fares for each stop. Here, we didn't just focus on collecting the first information for only the first information for the stop, but also the coordinate location of these stops. And this proved to be challenging in a sense that the drivers and also the drivers that applied these routes, when they are applying their routes, when there is no one to get down at these at some stops, they wouldn't wait for you to collect your coordinate location. So to overcome these challenges, what we did was that prior to applying this route, we talked to the driver and also the driver conductor to tell them our tasks and what we intend to do. That was one way that we overcome this challenge. But in instances that this didn't work, what we do is we walk this route to collect the coordinate location for these stops, which is vital for what we are doing here in Accra, Ghana. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Idris. We'll now move on to Albert. Albert, if you could talk about the data collection in Dar es Salaam, please. Thank you.
Yes, greetings to everyone. My name is Engineer Albert, coming from Tanzania, in the University of Dar es Salaam team, working on this project. So, for the data collection part here in Tanzania, we collected data at Dar es Salaam city, which is the busiest one. In the Dar es Salaam city, it has 5 major districts, and we managed to collect data on the 2 we call them big size districts, which were Ubungo and the Kinondoni, which each of them has an maybe estimated area of 200 maybe kilometers square. So the general operation of paratransit here in Dar es Salaam is many of the paratransit are offering service from the CBD to the outskirts, and many of them are running along the trunk roads, the collector roads, and the arterial roads. But in our city, we also have the BRT line corridors, where adjacent to the BRT corridors, we also have the paratransit is still running, taking people from CBD to other areas. But normally in the peak hours, people opt for other mode of transport, such as car sharing or 3-wheelers and the other private owned vehicles. So in the data collection, we managed to collect data as per our 3 instruments. We managed to collect data on the 59 routes, which maybe 60% of the routes are moving from one district to another district. And on top of that, we managed to collect data on the paratransit and vehicle operation cost at 25 terminals, where on the 25 terminals, we managed to interview 661 drivers. So they responded, and we are very sure that the data will be representative of the sample. And as many routes are very long, we managed to collect 1,000 number of stops along all the routes. In the data collection, the major challenges that we face, or the major challenges that is existing, is many of the paratransit are private owned. So this at some time it creates unstable conditions along the road. So when they are private owned, it is not easy to control the availability for the commuters. But also many or some of the roads are not accessible by the paratransit. So you can find that some roads, the only accessible mode of transport are the 3-wheelers and border. So in summary, I can report that is a general overview of how data were collected here in Dar es Salaam City, Tanzania. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you very much, Albert, as well. So those are the data collection that were carried out in the 2 cities. And these are some of the indicators that are being derived. We are having operational indicators, vehicle indicators, and personal indicators as well. And these are just some summaries. Some of the things that are been picked up from the questionnaire surveys so far. For instance, fare type, we haven't fixed, and there are various proportions. We have headway information, wait time, operating hours, and many others that are also in our data we are currently analyzing. And also, very importantly, this is just a quick one I want to point out about fare disparities, which is very, very important for paratransits. So for instance, it's very important to know, for instance, for 1 minute of travel or for 1 kilometer of travel, how much does it cost, either in Accra, Ghana, or Dar es Salaam. And what we are finding here, for instance, is to see the fare per travel distance and then fare per travel time. And it can vary very widely. So for instance, you could pay 1 city, Ghana cedis for some routes, but other routes you could pay as high as 4 cedis or 5 cedis for the same travel time or travel distance. And these disparities also characterize what actually happens with a lot of these travels on the ground. And we also conducted a stakeholder consultation to ask them with some of the questions relating to the stakeholder backgrounds, their public transport system, the way the routes are set up, zones, the way also the service zones are also demarcated. And we also engaged them in a group discussion on policy and finance for paratransits, and then the operators in terms of the infrastructure and the improvement, and also in terms of the users for safety, inclusivity, and accessibility of transport and service quality from the point of view of users. And also, very importantly, we also looked at research and development activities that can be engaged to improve paratransit in general. This is a photograph of the stakeholder consultation carried out in Accra just this month. And we have had a whole range of stakeholders coming from public transport regulators. We have the operators on board, we have the law enforcement, we have the healthcare people on board, we have Ministry of Education sector involved, and several others. And we have ongoing activities, data analysis, stakeholder consultation, and dissemination activities also on the way. So the take-home message I would like to provide with this presentation is that good knowledge of the current transport system is very important for any policy discussion. And this project is trying to characterize that current public transport system as we have in Accra, Ghana, and in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. And that detailed performance indicators for the operators, for the vehicle, for the routes, and labor information and maintenance and many others are also very important to characterize the operation of public transport in terms of paratransits. And this will provide more evidence so that policy discussions are being guided by data that are actually on the ground. So thank you very much, Winnie. And sorry, looks I've taken a bit more time that has been allocated.
No problem, Jeff. Thank you. And thank you very much for bringing Idrisu and Albert to actually give us the insights as people who are on the ground. That's really great. Thank you very much. Your paper will have reflections from Mark Zudgest on your paper, and then later on we'll see how you come back. So Mark is the Sanral Chair of Transport Planning and Engineering and Head of Department of Civil Engineering of the University of Cape Town. He has a PhD from the Netherlands Research School for Transport, Infrastructure and Logistics, TRAIL. He is the editor-in-chief for the Journal of Transport Geography and associate editor for the Journal of South African Institution of Engineering, SAIS. With Professor Roger Berends, he is the founder of the new Elsevier Journal of African Transport Studies, which we are soon to see out there. Mark's research is on the development and application of quantitative techniques for modeling and assessment of transport systems in the context of developing countries. More specifically, looks at spatial and network models for transport justice studies, choice model for modeling transport behavior in Africa, as well as optimization of hybrid transport systems using meta-heuristics and simulation-based optimization. He has co-authored over 100 peer-reviewed journal and conference articles. So he's very much best placed to give reflections on Gift's presentation. Thank you. Where is Mark? Mark, we
I'm
still
here.
have you on. Good.
Can you see me?
Yes, now I can see you, Mark.
Okay. Well, I think I'm not having my day because I prepared for the last presentation. I have questions for Christo and team, but let me wing it here. Wonderful presentation by the Ghana and Tanzania team. Very much related also to the work that we are preparing for Rwanda and Malawi. What I really think it's interesting, and I think also Jacqueline Klopp posted that for us, is that we are actually starting to see different data sets being collected everywhere across the continent. And if we find ways of coordinating that and streamlining that, we will start to see much better data and research outputs for African research. I think my questions would be mostly related to this whole notion of co-designing, which also the third group is presenting on today. So this team is also trying to adopt that co-design approach in collecting their findings. To what extent do you already see that the co-design approach is giving us better insights and better results than the more traditional survey-based techniques that we use? Perhaps that's the first question to Dr. Dumedan.
Winnie, should I respond now or?
Let him finish. Let him finish. You will come later. Thank you.
And then, so the second point is, and that's perhaps also more like a visionary idea. So how can we guarantee fair equity, and how can we use the findings from your two cities and your two surveys to show that to develop better fairs and more equitable fairs, and how can we guarantee that?
Okay, all right. I think Gift, you can now get back to respond to those very useful issues that need discussion even beyond Gift. The issue of co-design is quite complex. So let's hear from Gift and how the study is giving us new insights into how to do that. Gift.
Thank you very much, Winnie. And thank you, Mark, for your comments. And yes, the issue of co-design, it's quite an evolving one. It's in the sense that we do not have all the answers yet. Now, what we are doing currently was through our instruments, we went to the field and got a lot of the data from the operators, regulators, and users, and all of that in both cities. Now, just our engagement alone is giving us a better understanding of the current transport system. And that understanding, even for the regulators, some of that information, they do not have it. Now, so one of the key things that we are finding, which, like I said, is evolving, is that a better characterization, better information, and better representation of some of this information will give the regulators and the policymakers some good grounding, so that when they are making decisions, they can really consider some of these. And another aspect of it is that we have to position ourselves to be flexible, so that the data can inform some of the policies and back and forth. So that's what I will say so far in terms of the co-design. In terms of the fair equity, now the fair equity is quite a problematic issue, especially here in Ghana. There has been cases of fair disputes, very negative consequences resulting from those issues. And what our data is even finding right now is that there are fair disparities. Now, as to whether that is a good thing or a bad thing, we are yet to find out. But what we are finding out is that just looking at fare alone, either by travel time or by travel distance, we might not get all the information. And we have just completed one stakeholder consultation where we shared some of our findings with them. And they have also given us their comments on that. But there's more to do in terms of fares, because even the fare system or the fare medium is not the same. And if and most operators only apply one route. And if fares are different, and I'm an operator, I will go to the locations where there are higher fares per travel time or per distance. So we think that this fare equity, it's also a changing conversation, which we need to get more information, and perhaps getting to the close of our project, we might have some more insights that we might share on this. But for now, we don't have conclusive information on this, but we have some information to guide the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Gift, and glad to know that you have information to guide the discussion. Others will join you in getting to the point where we have the information and can talk about fair equity. So you will come back again later after we have this our last presentation with further observations on your paper and any others. Right now, I want to call upon Crystal Venter, who is going to talk about co-design laboratories for public transport information in African cities. Chris, if you like, you can start loading your presentation, and I'll just talk briefly about you. Dr. Crystal Venter is a professor in Department of Civil Engineering at the University of Pretoria. He teaches undergraduate and postgraduate courses in transport engineering and planning, public transport planning, and transport modeling. He received his PhD degree in transportation engineering from the University of California, Berkeley, in 1998, and then worked in CSIR until he joined academia in 2003. His research interests focus on intersection of transport policy, public transport deployment, and societal impacts within the challenging environment of African cities. He leads the University of Pretoria's research collaboration with International BRT Center of Excellence and is a serving member on several research advisory and editorial panels, including the SAIS Journal. His recent research includes work on the impacts of COVID-19 on work from home and transport behavior, minibus taxi upgrading, and assessment of first and last mile environments. Crystal, you're welcome to share with us your work.
Thank you, Winnie. Thank you for that very comprehensive introduction. So I'm going to be presenting using a novel method here, to me at least, not PowerPoint, but the Miro board that we used as a team in our group to put our thoughts together at the end of our project, and that was just last week. So I'll be presenting really on behalf of the different kind of lab leaders that we had within our team, and I might be getting some things wrong, but I'll do my best here. I see some of our collaborators are also on the session, so maybe you'll just jump in when you feel I'm getting things wrong, or I help answer some of the questions at the end. But I think our project fits in quite nicely with the topic that we've been hearing about. It's also around minibus taxis, informal transport. We very much look at the user perspective. So the project is titled Co-Design Laboratories for Public Transport Information. And let me just quickly talk to you about the different goals of the project. So it's located within the wider question of how can we use co-design or participatory, or let's call it co-creative kind of approaches to help solve public transport challenges in African cities. So that's against the background of public transport having a really hard time, I think, worldwide, and we needing to find better ways of incorporating and understanding users' needs and users' perspectives in what we do. And we're using public transport information as a lens through which to explore these participatory approaches. And it's public transport information from the user's perspective. So that's across a whole range of different types of information. Some of them we are familiar with in the minibus taxi environment. Some of them, like maps of networks and so on, are things that we are familiar with in other modes as well. The study is located in two countries, in South Africa and in Uganda. And so we wanted to also learn some things about comparing our experiences across the different geographical contexts here. So let me then jump into a description of the 4 different co-design labs that we were running in this project. So essentially the project was structured around these 4 different labs that were exploring different themes related to information provision in informal transport, in the different places, contexts, like we've said, and also different methods. So quite looking at things from quite different angles, and then seeing what we can learn about that when putting it all together. So the first lab is one that we did here in Tshwane in South Africa, and it was together with colleagues in information science and information design. So very much a nice multidisciplinary kind of team that we had here. The question was really, what do minibus taxi passengers want from a map? So, we've had efforts to create maps for minibus taxi services. We've heard about that, the data collection efforts around that already in the previous two talks. But the question here was, if we were to produce a map that people could actually use, what can we learn about what should be on that map? Should it just be a reproduction of Google Maps, or should it look quite different? So, for instance, questions like what do we do about routes and stops, and the variations in routes and stops that we get on a day-to-day and hourly basis? What kind of features do passengers want on such a map? What is the visual language that they want to see? What's the level of detail? And then also, how could such a thing be disseminated and delivered to people? So it raised questions of whether we want digital products or maybe paper-based kinds of things. So we organized this by zooming into 2 particular commuter areas within Tshwane, outlying areas where people take relatively long taxi trips to come into the CBD. And we had in each of these areas a series of 3 workshops with the same group of people in every workshop. So we took them through a process throughout the year of engaging with the questions and building the maps themselves. We also informed the map building process with some actual mapping of the routes, of the taxi routes that the taxis are operating on. So we did some GPS data collection there as well, and then also had some more formal surveys and interviews that we did with the workshop participants. So you can see some pictures here of the process. We had a very positive response from the participants. We sometimes had workshops carrying on for 3 or 4 hours over the time that it was originally planned for, because people were just so excited to be involved in this project, and they really appreciated, I think, the opportunity to give input into a thing like a map for the taxi routes in their area. And maybe I should, of course, say that such maps don't currently exist, and that's true for, I think, almost all taxi or minibus services within Africa. So from the process that we engaged with, we eventually ended up drawing up some prototype maps that were graphically developed for us by people in information design here at the university. And we tried to get different kind of perspectives or visual languages across in the different types of maps. So this one you see, for instance, is a map between the area of Mabopane up north down to the Pretoria CBD. This is about a 40-kilometer distance. You can see how the different routes are mapped here using different colors, and there are variations in the routes that taxis offer. But from the key here, you can see that there's a whole bunch of different features that people said that they wanted on such a map. It includes different landmarks. So landmarks very important to help with navigation along a route for people to know where to get on and off. And also landmarks that are related to very specific places and brand names, for instance. People said, don't tell me get off at the petrol garage, but tell me get off at the Total. So, people have a very particular language that they attach to their travel places. And the idea was also brought up by the users that, well, they really liked the idea of having a QR code that one could embed on such a map, so that even if the map is delivered in hard copy and put up at taxi ranks or even in vehicles, that people could also get a digital version of that they could take home with them and pass on to other people. So this is the one prototype. We also ended up with another prototype that looked quite different. And here the idea was to say, well, if people are really so attached to using landmarks to navigate, shouldn't a map just consist of landmarks and photos of places that you will travel past? And if that was not going to be helpful for people, so not necessarily a spatial representation on a map. This one didn't quite find as much purchase amongst the workshop participants in the end. So we found this also an interesting outcome of the study. Okay, so that was lab 1. Lab 2 was run by the Urban Action Lab at Makerere University in Kampala. And the question here was really about information and its role within decision-making in the taxi industry itself. So some of the two major questions that they asked were, how are paratransit routes established and how do they change over time? And what are the processes, the decision-making processes and so on that inform this route establishment? And then the second question, what kind of information do they rely on to then establish a route? And what is the place of information within this ecosystem? And so the work was informed by also qualitative engagement with taxi operators, with regulators, planners within the city. And there were a few interesting things that came out. Of course, there is this notion of ownership over routes that certainly informs how paratransit operators and associations think about the service that they provide. There's an interesting issue around route champions. So the fact that routes are linked to individual people with quite strong control over information that is provided about that route. Sometimes the stage chairman, who's the chairman of the association or the union, has a very strong role to play in this. Typically a person with high societal standing, even some religious connections and historical connections. So information tends to be, as far as I understand it, controlled and used also as a way of driving ownership and change within the paratransit industry. And then there was some other issue that came up, was just the issue of sharing and branding and promoting routes, where providing information and advertisement was actually a very important strategy for operators to promote a new route. Sometimes this happened through digital platforms, but it's interesting that we do see a trend of app-based kind of platforms retreating within African cities. And Kampala is one example, but we saw it elsewhere, as I'll tell you just now. Ride-hailing services are dropping apps, and it seems to be that the kind of digital environment of information provision is not stable, and we don't quite have a workable commercial model in Africa. So that's around lab 2. Lab 3 was another one that was run at the University of Pretoria, and here the title was Information Design of a Travel Information App within the classroom. So we asked the question here, to what extent can we use travel information to help students engage with co-design kind of processes? And so it was a class of information design students in the 3rd year. This was linked to the travel app called Rambo that one of the other project partners developed and was planning to roll out in South Africa in 2023-24. And the students essentially had to take a look at this app and decide how could they build a similar kind of thing. They built in exercises of talking to users of minibus taxis, and then developing a kind of a prototype or a wireframe for what such a thing could look like. So just showing you here some of the decks that the students developed to explain what they did. They came up with some very nice and I think innovative kind of approaches around what such an app should contain. They included developing some archetypes, typical user profiles to say what is it that different types of people would want from such an app. And then they played around with the different other players in this field. Another group had a digital prototype that they developed, and they developed this little character called Wimpit, who is a little chicken that helps to personify the service that they're getting. And they developed and wrote a trip planning kind of app kind of approach. They didn't, it was just a wireframe, but they showed how such a thing could work, including the walking trips of aspects of a minibus taxi trip and so forth. And then what's interesting is that they also decided to include a little bit of a game aspect in there, which is very loud. But the idea that we could make it more interesting for users by adding some interactive and gaming aspects in when they are using the app. So obviously they also took note of the fact that a lot of these app users would be young people who are really very app savvy, if you want to call it that. Okay, so that was the lab 3 with in the School of the Arts here. Let me go to lab 4, which was run by Where Is My Transport, who is a digital provider in this field. So they have developed this app called Rumbo, which had been deployed in other parts of the world. And the idea was to see how we could use co-design kind of approaches to explore specifically the aspect of contributions and user contributions within such an app. So the research questions that they were looking at were, how can a community and a contribution-oriented digital solution meet information gaps that are faced by public transport users, and what appetite do informal transport users in Cape Town have for contributing mobility information? So the idea is that because informal transport keeps on changing so much, and there's such an alive and adaptive environment, that one feasible way to keep it current and to keep the information that's provided correct is to get users to contribute and volunteer information, either tracking information or information about changes. It's no longer true, this changed yesterday, or information about real-time events and incidents and congestion and things like that. So they also ran a number of workshops in Cape Town with different user profiles and got some really interesting results from there. I want to just highlight a few of them. One is that, of course, the issue of digital literacy is important. So there are people with very different levels of digital literacy that impact the way that they are able to use such an app, and also the extent to which they can contribute their own information to that. Socioeconomic context is very important. So we have a lot of smartphones, but we do have a lot of low-end devices in the market, and data is very expensive in South Africa. So whatever we come up with, it needs to be very data efficient, and we might certainly have to look at low-fi, which is low Wi-Fi bandwidth kind of solutions, or even free Wi-Fi options. The idea of contributions and co-design through the contributions showed that contributions do have the potential to build network effects and progressively enhance the value generated for users. So the users showed that they were quite happy to volunteer such information, but that to actually make it work in practice, it's not exactly clear how one would do that, how you would incentivize people to provide such information, and how you could build a workable model for that. Right, so they really engaged in UX testing in their process. Now, unfortunately, where is my transport stopped trading. They went out of business during the course of the year. I think we learned some really valuable lessons from the work that was done here, but it raises the question of whether digital products are really suitable given the financial climate, the economic climate, and given what people are willing to pay for within the African context. Actually, it goes for developing countries, global South countries in general. Right, so I want to just zoom in on some final key learnings then, things around that we learned from all of these different labs together. The first thing is that informal services are really quite challenging. They provide a lot of challenges to information provision because of the informal nature, the fact that services, routes, schedules, nothing is fixed, everything keeps on changing. And so providing an information product in that environment is certainly not a straightforward thing to do. There are a lot of diverse information needs that will need a range of solutions to be addressed. So there might be a place for some sort of digital solutions if we can find the right format in which to deliver that. But there's certainly a place for analog, good old paper-based kind of information products as well. The issue of user contributions, how to make it work. We said, like I already said, the financials of app development are still very challenging, and it's not clear how that would work. And there seems to be a role for the public sector also in this. So in cases where public sector has come to the party in terms of providing some digital platforms for data collection, for tracking vehicles in the Western Cape, and so forth, we see the potential for more sustainable solutions being developed. Then around just the issue of mapping, there does seem to be a role for maps to provide spatial information for minibus taxi users, but we think of this the solution as being some sort of an enriched map that goes beyond just the traditional routes, but also includes other kinds of spatial informations like landmarks, even hand signals, and changing points, places where one transfers between vehicles and so forth. Somehow there's a whole range of different things that people want from such a map that goes beyond the traditional one. So context is very important in all of these things that we've talked about. There's going to be issues around socioeconomic factors, age, mobile data, and so forth, that are very important in the solutions that we come up with. What did we learn about co-design in general, the practical experiences from that? Well, the first thing is that having some sort of a localization of the exercise, asking people in a place what do they want, what do they use, we found that extremely useful and very insightful. It's a very rich experience. It raises the question of how does one come up with a general model of a public transport information that is also so that's scalable, but also sufficiently local to have a local feel and certainly local information in it. That it's not clear how that would work. We used peer researchers in our co-design workshops, in some of our co-design workshops. That means we used people from the community that helped to do the research. And we found that was extremely valuable as a way of connecting with the community, of talking the right language, of making sure we're interpreting things correctly, and of really collaborating in identifying the research from both directions. And then the students also found it very useful to be looking at solution-oriented design. So not to asking what is really the problem that we're trying to solve here. Not what will implement the theory in the best way, but rather what is the solution that can speak to the problem that we're looking at. And then lastly, just in terms of the feedback from the participants themselves in our various co-design workshops and engagements, people were very positive. There was really a sense of appreciation of being involved in the process sense of ownership. People really wanted to get hold of the product that comes out of it. It's like, where's the map? Are we going to see the app and things like that? People felt empowered in being brought into the process. So there's just a huge amount of goodwill and interest that I think can be tapped to create better transport systems and to do the planning in a better way if we figure out how to, in a sustainable way, draw on those kind of resources. And it was really a co-learning kind of experience where some of the things that we thought initially would be important in the information landscape turned out to be not important when you go and ask people, and vice versa. So learning in both directions has been very rich in this project that we were running. Okay, so then just finally the people who were involved in this project. Big thanks to all of these folks who did a great job in running the various parts of this project this year. Thank you very much. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Very interesting study. We wait to read it when it's out. I'll now call upon the discussant, who is Hannibal Bwire, who is an associate professor of transport planning and engineering based at the Department of Transport and Geotechnical Engineering, University of Dar es Salaam. His research areas of interest include transport planning and engineering, travel behavior analysis, school travel planning, and transportation data collection methods. His publications include implementation and evaluation of walking buses and cycle trains in Cape Town and Dar es Salaam. Hannibal, you are welcome to give us reflections on this interesting presentation. Hannibal, do I still have you? Bwire? I hope I didn't lose him. Hannibal?
He's online.
He's online. He needs to jump on the stage.
Thank you, Winnie. Yes.
Okay.
Here, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me, please?
I can. Yes, I can. Not yet. Hannibal?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. It's really a very interesting study, and as it gives insights through which users and operators of public transport are taken on board in planning and the designing of our transport systems. And from the presentation and also the document that there are two words that maybe I would wish Chris
Your network? Hannibal?
And the other book. Yes, I'm saying yes. Hello.
Your network is disconnecting a bit. I hope you are in good network. Just try again. Go ahead.
May I suggest that Hannibal, that you turn your camera off and maybe you have better capacity for the audio.
Try that. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I was saying, just for clarity, maybe I was wondering whether co-creation and the co-design, they mean the same thing, because they have been used in the presentation and also in the project document. So I think some clarification is needed there. And the other aspect that I would wish to have some clarification is the approaches, the core design approach. Can it be used to assess the sufficiency of travel information that is transport systems, big terminals or interchanges? Can it be used to assess the sufficiency of travel information that is available. And the other aspect that I have gathered from the presentation, level of detail of travel information, it wasn't quite clear to me what it with regard to the tax users and level 1. And the last one, which is quite general, was
just
also
repeat that one again, Hannibal. Just repeat the third one. It wasn't very clear, so that Christo gets it. The third one was, what's the issue? The third one.
The third one is where we have tax users. There is one aspect of information known as level, termed as level. So I was wondering, what does this mean? So, and the last issue is can the digital platforms or prototypes, including the Rumbo app, be used to monitor and evaluate the performance of existing public transport systems? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I'll ask Christo. I hope you got them. You got the questions. Yeah. So if you can just briefly answer them. I think the first one is on clarity of co-creation and co-design. If those mean one and the same thing, a bit of clarification there. And then the approach of co-design, whether it can be used to assess transport information. And then we had the third one, which was, I couldn't get it very well, but it was on taxi uses. And then the last one was whether digital prototypes can be used to monitor travel.
Okay, Hannibal, thank you. I wonder if, I didn't get the third question at all. If you would maybe just type that into the comment box. So while I'm answering the other three, we can have that one written out for us. But to answer the first and the second questions, I mean, co-design, co-creation, collaborative, this and that, these terms are used somewhat interchangeably. They come from different disciplines. So the discipline of co-design, for instance, comes mostly from the information sciences and the idea of designing computerized kind of interfaces together with users. So I don't think we examined and got hung up on definitions too much. The overall sense that we wanted to look at was how do we work with users in developing an understanding of what they need and how to supply that, how to answer to that. So, but you know, in our final report, the technical report, we will probably have to define these things more tightly so that we know exactly what we're talking about in reference to the literature. So I will make sure that we pick up on that point. Can it be used to judge the sufficiency of travel information at terminals? Yeah, absolutely. I think the idea of talking to people and even presenting them with an existing system, so not developing a new thing, but looking at what there is at the moment and exploring what works about that and what not. That was actually one of the starting points of some of our workshops here, to say what is currently not working for you, what is the information that you're currently looking for that you're not getting, and can it be delivered in a better way. So I think looking at ways, even more formal ways to judge and evaluate current services, and not even information, just information, you know, terminal design, even the location of infrastructure that we build, where we sometimes find that, you know, we build infrastructure for minibus taxis and they don't get used at all, either by the passengers or by the drivers. You know, by talking to people better and getting better ways of doing that throughout the design process would help us much better to understand how, you know, how to do those things better. And these kind of processes that we talked about, I think, could be useful for that.
Typed it.
Actually,
He's typed it now.
The third question is actually in the chat there, Christo, if you take a look from Hannibal.
Okay, the level of detail of information, what does this mean? I think that's related to whether we need to, for instance, show on a map street names and intersection to the same level of detail as you would find it on a Google map, for instance, or whether it would be fine for us to just indicate main roads and main road names, the kind of highways that people use to navigate with. Because we did find that a lot of people in practice actually don't even know street names. So they don't know it's the R101 that they are using. They might have some other name for it, or they just don't have a name for it at all. So we do, yeah, so that was one of the things that we wanted to play with around, and found that on some things people have high levels of information needs that they have. One of those things was actually around safety, and I think it was also mentioned earlier by one of the other speakers, the safety of an environment, the safety of a waiting area, the safety of a transfer point. And we don't actually know very well how to express that. I think that's another follow-up project, is how do we collect information and how do we present such information to people in a way that they can use. But on other things, people didn't really have much need for high levels of detail. And then the fourth question was whether an app like Rumbo could be used to monitor or measure existing transport systems. So I'm really only familiar with Rumbo, partly familiar with Rumbo from what I learned from Where Is My Transport. Rumbo is built was built from a number of components. One of them is a database that has all the information in it on routes and services and infrastructure and so forth. That database can be used, as far as I understand it, for various things. So one could use it offline if you wanted to, do accessibility analyses or do a mapping of catchment areas or walking distances or whatever. And that could be therefore useful for the kind of thing that you spoke about, to measure existing transport systems and to monitor how well they're working. That could be independent from the actual real-time use of such a database as part of a customer-focused information product. So I think it raises the point that I think what Mark also said earlier, if we have such data that is generally available, that's validated, it can find very many different uses that could add value to various aspects of the transport system, from real-time to planning to monitoring to management and so forth. I hope I answered more or less all the questions.
Thank you. Yeah, we are still having a little bit of time to engage. So if there is any gap, you will always come back. I think I now want to open the session to all of us, and I've seen quite a number of observations and comments, and I'll be a little bit biased. I'll start with some who had some questions which were a bit heavy in terms of there could be 2 or 3. I will start with Klopp, Jackie, and then I'll go to Helen Morrissey to raise their questions. They are in the platform, but it's better, they are better articulated. Klopp, Jackie, go ahead. Did I lose Jackie?
Oh,
Jackie?
hi, Winnie.
Oh, good. Hi. I didn't lose you. Get ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, I asked a bunch of different questions, but first of all, I thought this work was really, really terrific. I guess I could ask the general question of how you're going to translate this work into policy impact. So I was very curious, the different kinds of maps and insights, how you're going to see them used and see tangible improvements in the transport sector. So maybe I'll just start with that very big question.
Yeah, I think they should just note it down, and then let me just have Helen Morrissey, just to raise your 2 questions or so, what you are raising, and then we will get the rest.
Hi,
go ahead.
Thanks, Winnie. Hi, thanks, Krista. Sorry, I'm sick in bed, so I might not be that articulate today. I've concentrated as best I can, so forgive me if I miss some detail. one was more of just a sort of interest question in terms of the routes that are actually licensed by the the provincial regulatory entities. From my experience looking at those in the Western Cape, I mean, years ago, not when I was in academia, but when I was in the private sector, those routes are described via often sort of the bend in the road, the school on the corner, and there has been some mapping efforts sort of from the regulatory side, from the official side, and I'm interested in what the sort of overlaps between the sort of licensed routes, which, you know, kind of emerge through operators running those routes and then asking them for them to be licensed. Like most taxi routes start out illegally and then become legalized through the demand that the taxis can show there is. So I'm just interested in how much overlap, or if there's any sort of comparison to be drawn there, because obviously things change and cities change. Secondly, I just wanted to know, because I noticed in the first presentation, the accessibility measure was very much it was access to jobs. And I was wondering, when you look at these maps and the things that people are saying, what sort of accessibility are people looking for? And are there any sort of interesting patterns that you, sorry, that you might not have expected that aren't sort of necessarily so work-based? I mean, I know that in Cape Town and Mitchell's Plain, when they did some work there, they found that people, like a lot of sort of care trips to the shops, trips to the doctor, trips to take care of an elderly relative, emerged much more strongly. Also sort of self-care trips to green spaces, trips to do community activities, etc. I was wondering if any of that sort of came up as valued, and I don't know if you could tell from the way that you did the research. And finally, in Christo's in your sorry, what you were just saying now, I was very interested in when you said that some of the infrastructure that gets built for the taxis is not used or underutilized, and I assume sometimes obviously appropriated in a way it's not intended. And I was interested to know sort of examples of that, if you have any examples of that that are particularly interesting, because I'm very interested in those sorts of topics. Thank you so much. Sorry for the barrage of questions. Feel free to answer whichever ones you choose.
Thank you. Nice observation. Thank you very much, Ellen. There is also a question from George Okam to Obiora, which is trying to know how were you able to get stops in GTFS, knowing that paratransit stop on demand and along routes. And then there is a question from Gift to Obiora again to clarify how individual accessibility needs are incorporated in the model. So I think let's handle those. There could be many others which you have picked. So I'll have a lap of round for the presenters, and if you have picked any other from the chat, include it. You can spend maybe 2 minutes each, if much 3 or less. Yeah, we start with Obiora. Obiora, we can start with you, then we'll go to Gifts, and we'll end with Christo.
Thank you very much, Winnie. For those questions, the stops particularly, we had our field agents ride in the minibus taxis and actually pick out these where they were stopping with GPS devices. And then at the end of the day, you filter that information, you download the information and filter it, of course, with a lot of validation with the agents on ground to then identify within this locality, in this area, you stopped 3 times, for instance, what will be the typical stop in that area. And of course, some cross-validation is done with Google Earth and to see what activities occur in that area. And then that helps you pinpoint what will be the most acceptable stop in that local area. So that was kind of the process that was used for the process. Then the question around how accessibility is incorporated, and at the individual level for this work, we looked at zonal levels. One of the things is that there is limitation in availability of data, so we are not able to access data to the individual's level. But and then the other question that I believe Helen had asked around which specific indicator for this work, specifically we use jobs and access to jobs as the key measure, because that was the information we had access to. The information about other activities and opportunities were not very available to access. And so access to jobs was sort of the strongest indicator of accessibility we used in this work, because that was the data we had available to us.
Thank you very much. We go to gift, and I can see people are engaging on the chat. Keep engaging, because we'll not have enough time to engage. Keep engaging, including presenters and discussants. If you have a response to any issue, post it over. Okay, gift.
All right, thank you very much, Winnie. Yes, I think one of the questions that was asked was in the chat in relating to how we selected the participants for our stakeholder consultation workshop. So what I earlier said was that we got all the key stakeholders relating to public transport, and we had regulators, we had users, the driver unions. We also had law enforcement and local government authorities, for instance, the assemblymen and assembly representatives. And then we also had the Ministry of Transport here in Ghana involved as well. And then, of course, we also had researchers from other universities and research institutes involved. And I've also acknowledged that we were not able to get all of them, but we had some of them represented. Winnie, I think that's all the questions I had in the chat. So thank you.
Thank you. Indeed, that's it. Crystal, will you go next?
So there was one question from Jackie about policy translation and application. I'm not quite sure, to be honest. I think there has certainly been an interest in South African government in looking at formalizing information systems for public transport, and unfortunately the efforts that have started to be developed have not come to fruition, and they go for a little bit and then they stop again. So how to interface with that kind of process and to support that and improve that, yeah, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, so the question about accessibility and accessibility, whether it's to work or to non-work trips or destinations. Savannah, I wonder if you want to come in and just say something about that, because Savannah was the most closely related to, involved with the workshops that we had here in Pretoria. If you picked up what kind of destinations do people want to gain access to, and what would this map be useful for? Is it just work trips or other kinds of trips as well?
Okay, Savannah, go ahead. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks for the question. So basically, it seemed as though people in both groups of Karankua and Mabopane, their route was to track the most important places, or they felt were the most important places from town, which is Pretoria, to their CBD. So they wanted to actually map their whole area so that anybody who was new or doesn't know the routes well can actually manage to navigate where they need to go. So if they put the main points for them, like the engine garage, for example, like the ShopRite, like they call them like centers, those are like starting points that everybody can navigate off from to get wherever they need to go. So they didn't focus on it being a trip to work or a trip for leisure. It was for anybody who needs to travel somewhere that doesn't know where they're going. So they tried to include, like I said, the most important places that they can then branch off from. But their highlight was the main route from Pretoria to town, and then everywhere from there that people could distribute from.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Savannah, for that. I hope, Venta, Crystal, are you done? That's it?
Well, there was a question from Helen about the ranks. Well, firstly about the regulatorily approved routes. We didn't really look at that at all. I can't really say how closely they correspond to what's actually out there. My guess is that they don't correspond at all, or very little, because of the way that these things work and change over time. And also the fact that individual operators tend to operate multiple different routes over the course of a few days and not just a single route. But that's, you know, in future, such formal databases could be the starting point, at least, of some sort of information. We haven't really thought about how one can try to leverage existing information within government from the regulators as a starting point of routes for route data. And then there was a question about ranks that are infrastructure that's built and not used. There are a few cases in Gauteng where the associations that are supposed to operate at routes refuse to go in there. Some of it is because of territorial disputes. You know, other associations lay claim to that area, or there's too much friction with other associations, and then it ends up not being used at all. Sometimes it's a question of convenience. The passengers want to be on this side of the road because it's close to the mall, and not on that side of the road. And therefore, the operators all go where the passengers are, and they just ignore what's being built. And to solve those kinds of problems ahead of time, that's certainly where participation and stakeholder engagement, really thorough stuff, would make a difference. Helen, I hope that answers it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's like we are running out of time, but I think the presentations today are just great, and there are new areas. Maybe that's why we are raising so many questions. Some of them we cannot even fully answer. Hopefully, when the research is over, we might be able to answer that. In particular, what Venta is saying right now about the routes may not correspond to the official routes. So could this be the transport injustice that we are seeing? Because they must be serving a purpose for them to create those routes which are not within the planning, you know, domain. So I think that there is quite some data that might come out of this research that has policy implications, like Jackie is raising or asking how this applies to policy. To me, that would be the best contribution to policy. If we can argue with them that, well, there is a large population that are just not connected because the routes that are serving them are not actually authorized routes, and they don't fall in any planning. And then the other issue is this issue of co-creation or co-development, whichever the word. Participation and co-creation or co-development has been very complex, even in other sectors, you know, how you do it and the cost involved, whether at planning level, especially to produce an outcome that is useful and can close the gap of transport injustice. So I think we are rolling out end of this work that is going on, which will be very useful for moving forward, because as all you have emphasized, paratransits are not catered for, and they don't seem to be planned for. So this information and data may be useful for planning, if at all people are keen on paratransit. In any case, they operate whether they are catered for or not. So at this point, I would want to call upon Jane to spend another 1 minute or so that we can close up. We are running with time, Jane.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, Winnie. And thank you, everyone, for an extremely fruitful and stimulating exchange. I think actually, besides all the amazing presentations and discussions, we've had a really active chat today. And I do think this is the first research forum in which the contributions were of such a high quality that some of the participating editors and editor board people from a journal decided to take initiative for special issue. Thank you very much for that. So yes. I want to make just 2 quick announcements with the 30 seconds I have left. Next year, we will be at VREF commemorating and working toward recognizing the 5 years of the MAC program. So the emphasis will be on gathering publications, results, synthesizing results in different thematic areas, and having research-oriented, or rather result-oriented research forums. So please stay tuned to this. This will be a great opportunity to catch up on some of the really state-of-the-art results that have come from the program the past 5 years. My final comment is our biggest event next year is the first African Transport Research Conference at UCT in collaboration with UCT and VREF in the beginning of March. I hope you're all connected to that. If not, get in touch and we'll see what can happen. Thank you very much, Winnie. I hope everybody can come on board with their faces. And I thank Winnie, as usual, for leading us through this process so well. Extremely exciting to see all the linkages that were made between different parts of this research community in the chat. And everyone come on and give a nice nice goodbye.
Pictures.
Thank you all.
Let's have your pictures
Goodbye.
on. Those who are off, we need.
Prof. August.
I can see you. Great. Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye.
It's been a great way to wrap up 2023. Thank you all. Very good.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Prof.
Happy 2024
Thank you,
to all of you.
Prof. Gift and
Oh,
Prof.
wow.
Winnie.
Look at this group. Great.
Wow.
All right.
Yay.
Bye.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Prof. Enoch.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. So
Prof.
good.
David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Too bad we can't have a post mingle. That would have been great.
All right.
Yeah.
Prof. Gift. Thank you.
Prof. Samuel, thank you.
Everybody's so happy today. Come on, you guys. This is
Well,
great.
it has to do with the quality of the presentations,
All right,
I
Karen.
think, right?
Karen, nice to see you.
Nice to
Yeah.
see you.
Yeah.
Bye.
It was so
All right,
exciting,
bye.
people coming in with
Bye.
different
Bye.
perspectives in the chat. That was just